My name is Elena. I'm 27 years old. You could practically smell the greed in the lawyer's office. My sister Clara was practically vibrating, drumming her perfect nails on the fancy mahogany table. My parents sat on either side of her, looking so smug, so satisfied, like they'd already won and were just waiting for the trophy. The three of them were a perfect little triangle of triumph. And then there was me, sitting across from them, feeling that familiar chill of being on the outside looking in. It wasn't a new feeling. It had pretty much been the wallpaper of my entire life. The lawyer, a Mr. Davies with a face made of professional boredom, cleared his throat. He adjusted his glasses and picked up the document that held my parents' final words. Except, plot twist, they weren't dead. This wasn't a normal will reading. This was their living trust. A fancy legal trick to hand over all their money to their kids while they were still alive. Their reason? To see the joy it brings. Yeah, I had a pretty good idea which kid they meant. Mr. Davies started with my sister's inheritance. His voice was a flat drone as he listed off a king's ransom. To my daughter Clara, he started, we bequeath the primary residence on Maple Avenue, fully paid. Clara sucked in a sharp breath. The associated stock portfolio, valued at about $4.2 million. The vacation property in the Hamptons. The modern art collection. And the $2.7 million in cash reserves. Everything. They gave her everything. The house I grew up in. The money from a business I'd quietly helped save. Clara shot me a look from across the table. It wasn't just victory. It was pity. The kind of look you give a stray dog. My parents were just beaming, glowing with this sick, proud generosity. And then Mr. Davies turned to me. The whole vibe in the room shifted. The buzz of Clara's win went dead quiet and awkward. He looked down at the paper, then up at me, with a flicker of something I couldn't quite read in his eyes. And to my other child, Elena, he read, his voice now even flatter. I leave the old oak desk from my study. Silence. The old oak desk. A piece of furniture. A huge, clunky, ridiculously old piece of wood that had been collecting dust in my father's office for my entire life. A cruel snort of laughter erupted from my sister. She tried to cover her mouth, but it was too late. The ugly sound bounced around the quiet room. My mother shot her a warning look, not because she cared about my feelings, but because it wasn't a good look. But my parents, their faces went white. The smug smiles were gone, replaced by pure, stark panic. My dad's jaw clenched, his knuckles white on the armrest. My mother's eyes darted between me, my father, and the desk, wide with terror. Oh, they knew. That desk wasn't just a piece of furniture, it was a time bomb. And I knew, in that instant, that somewhere inside its dusty, forgotten corners was the one secret that would bring their perfect world crashing down. It's a strange thing, being the unfavored child. It doesn't happen all at once. It's more like a slow drip education in worthlessness. You learn it in the small stuff. Your drawing gets taped to the side of the fridge, not the front. Your scraped knee gets an annoyed sigh, while your sister's sniffle gets her a week in bed with soup. It's not just a feeling, it's a fact of life. And if you've ever felt that way, you know it's not just in your head. It turns out parental favoritism is super common. Some studies show that up to 40% of Americans with siblings think their parents had a favorite. I wasn't just in that 40%, I was the poster child for it. My life next to Clara's was like a black and white photo next to a full-color painting. We were sisters, raised in the same house by the same parents, but we might as well have been from different planets. Clara was the sun, and I was the shadow she cast. It started young, like it always does. Take our birthdays. Mine and Clara's are 2 weeks apart. For her 7th birthday, our backyard became a literal carnival. I'm talking a hired pony, a bouncy castle the size of a garage, and a magician who pulled a real-life rabbit from a hat. All her little friends from private school were there, their parents sipping champagne. My dad had his arm around her the whole day, booming about his little princess. 2 weeks later, my 5th birthday. I got a sheet cake from the supermarket and 3 balloons. My parents said a big party wasn't needed because I was a quiet girl who didn't like a fuss. The real reason? They'd blown the party budget and all their energy on Clara. I sat there with my parents and grandma, blowing out 5 candles while Clara whined that the frosting was too sweet. I didn't cry. I'd already learned my tears were an inconvenience. That feeling of being overlooked can lead to some serious loneliness. Turns out, Americans who grew up as the non-favorite are more than twice as likely to say they felt lonely all the time. For me, it was a daily thing. That pattern just set in concrete as we got older. In high school, Clara decided to be a cheerleader. The custom uniform, the expensive summer camps, it all cost a fortune. My parents paid for it all without blinking, slapping proud cheerleader parent stickers all over their car. Me? I got into astronomy. I wanted a good telescope and had saved up half the money from my part-time job. When I asked if they could help with the other half, my dad didn't even look up from his paper. Elena, that's an expensive hobby. Are you sure you'll stick with it? Let's not be wasteful. I ended up buying a cheap second-hand one with my own money and spent my nights on the roof, feeling a lot closer to the cold, distant stars than to my own family. Then came the cars. For Clara's 18th, a new convertible with a giant red bow. For my 18th, I got the keys to my mom's 10-year-old station wagon that smelled like old milk. It's reliable, my dad said. He was right. It got me to my 2 jobs, which I was working to save up for college. Because college was the biggest joke of all. Clara got into some fancy, out-of-state private college with a price tag that could fund a small country. My parents acted like she'd cured cancer. They took out loans, cashed in investments, and told her to just have the full college experience. Me, with slightly better grades, I was gently guided toward community college. It's smarter, Elena, my mom said with that fake sympathy voice. You can live at home, save money. You're the practical one. I wasn't practical. I was unfunded. While Clara went to sorority parties in Cancun, I was pulling all-nighters fueled by bad coffee, working 30 hours a week to pay for my own tuition and books. It wasn't just about money, it was emotional. At any family dinner, the conversation was all Clara, all the time. Clara's new friends, Clara's grades, Clara's latest drama. I graduated community college with high honors and got a scholarship to a state university. When I told my parents, my dad just patted my shoulder and said, "That's nice, honey. Oh, that reminds me, Clara needs us to help her move into her new apartment. It has a balcony. This stuff has real consequences." Non-favored kids often grow up with anxiety, depression, and this core belief that they're just not worthy of love. I wore that feeling like a heavy coat, but it also made me quiet, observant, and tough. While Clara was being handed the world, I was learning to build my own, one painful brick at a time. I put myself through school, got a business degree, and started climbing the ladder at a logistics company. I worked twice as hard as anyone because I felt like I had to prove I deserved to even be there. Clara, meanwhile, just drifted. She started a boutique, funded by mom and dad, that failed in a year. Then she decided to be a lifestyle blogger, which mostly meant my parents paid her credit card bills. They just called her creative and finding herself. When I finally saved up and put a down payment on a tiny condo, my mom said, "Oh, Elena, are you sure you can handle a mortgage?" They never saw me as capable, only as a risk. The worst part came a few years ago. I started having these awful headaches. Doctors found a benign brain tumor. It wasn't cancer, but it needed complex surgery, and my insurance wouldn't cover the whole thing. The out-of-pocket cost was insane. I swallowed my pride, the hardest thing I have ever done, and asked my parents for a loan. I sat in their perfect living room, where they'd just hosted Clara's massive wedding, which they paid for completely. I laid out the medical bills, my hands shaking. My father looked at the number and his face just hardened. "Elena, this is a lot of money," he said, his voice cold. "We just paid for the wedding. Things are tight." Things were not tight. I knew their finances. I was the one who had secretly untangled their business books a few years back when my dad's creative accounting almost got them audited. My mother chimed in, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Are you sure this surgery is absolutely necessary? Have you looked into other options?" Other options. They were asking me to consider other options for a tumor in my brain after they'd just dropped 6 figures on a party for my sister. The cruelty of it just knocked the wind out of me. I walked out of their house that day and never asked them for a thing again. I took out a high-interest medical loan, worked overtime for a year, and sold my condo to pay it off. The physical scar faded, but the one they left on my heart didn't. It was the final, brutal reminder of my place. I was an expense they couldn't afford, while my sister was an investment they'd pour everything into. But there was one person who saw it all. My grandfather, my mom's dad, Grandpa Thomas. He was a quiet, observant man, a carpenter and cabinet maker who saw the world in terms of structure and balance. And he saw the crooked structure of our family with a clarity that both scared and comforted me. Grandpa Thomas didn't talk much, but when he did, it mattered. While my parents fawned over Clara's scribbles, he'd sit with me, showing me how to identify wood by its grain. "Measure twice, cut once, Elena," he'd rumble. It was his rule for carpentry and for life. He lived with us for his last few years, in a small room off the study. From there, he had a front row seat to the whole messed up family dynamic. He saw the favoritism, the casual cruelty. He rarely stepped in. That wasn't his style. But he'd find these quiet moments to prop me up. He'd leave a book he thought I'd like on my bed, or slip me a 20 with a wink and a whisper, "For your secret adventures." He was my silent partner in a house where I otherwise felt like an enemy spy. The oak desk in my father's study? That was originally his. He'd built it himself decades ago, as a gift for my father. It was a masterpiece, with a secret compartment he'd shown me when I was a kid. A place for treasures and secrets, he'd said. Of course, my father just used it to pile up junk, totally oblivious to its real value. About a month before he passed, Grandpa Thomas called me into his room. He was frail, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "Elena," he said, his voice thin but steady, "I'm not going to be around forever. And there are some things a man needs to set right." I sat on his bed, my heart aching. "Don't say that, Grandpa." "Facts are facts," he said, waving a hand. "Now listen, your parents, they love you, in their own broken way. But they're blind. Blinded by what's easy and what shines. They see Clara as a reflection of their success, and they just keep polishing that reflection." He took a rattling breath. "You, though, you're like this old wood," he said, knocking on his oak headboard. "Strong, solid, you've got a core they don't even know how to look for. And that's why you'll be okay." He reached for my hand. His skin felt like paper. "I can't change their will, Elena. But I've made an arrangement a long time ago. Your father has a short memory for things that are inconvenient." His eyes drifted toward the wall that connected his room to the study. "That desk," he whispered. "My desk. It holds more than paper. It holds a promise. When the time comes, don't be fooled by the big, flashy gifts. Look for the foundation. The strongest trees have the deepest roots." He squeezed my hand. "One day, it will all make sense. It will make things right. You just have to be patient. Measure twice, cut once." I didn't really get it. I thought he was just speaking in riddles to comfort me. I kissed his forehead and left, feeling loved but confused. A month later, he was gone. And at his funeral, I watched my parents sob over a man they'd mostly ignored while Clara checked her phone during the eulogy. Years went by. The memory of that conversation faded, but it never completely disappeared. It was like a seed, just waiting. When the lawyer said the words, "I leave the old oak desk," that seed sprouted. Grandpa's voice echoed in my head. "Look for the foundation." And my parents' panicked faces were all the confirmation I needed. They remembered. They knew. In that moment, I knew my inheritance wasn't a piece of furniture. It was a map. And it was time to go find the treasure. The desk arrived at my tiny apartment 2 days later. It was a monster, a dark oak behemoth that took up half my living room. Clara had called me the day before, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Elena, darling, I heard you got the desk. How quaint. Listen, if you don't have room for it, I can get a consignment shop to pick it up. You could probably get a few hundred for it. Every little bit helps, right?" "I'm keeping it, Clara," I said. "Oh, okay," she'd said, confused. "Well, don't let it clutter up your little place." Once the movers left, I stood in front of it, running my hands over the cool wood. It smelled like old paper, polish, and history. I felt my grandfather there with me, and this calm sense of purpose washed over me. This was it. I spent an hour just looking at it, remembering how Grandpa had shown me the secret as a kid. You press a certain knot in the carving, and a hidden drawer pops out. My heart pounded as my hands traced the carvings. I found the knot. I pressed it. Nothing. I pressed harder. Still nothing. My heart just sank. Had he been confused? Was this all in my head? Was I just a fool chasing some old man's dying wish? No. Measured twice, cut once. I took a breath. Grandpa was a master craftsman. He wouldn't make something so easy to break. I got on the floor and looked at it from every angle. Then I saw it, a tiny scratch near the floor, right next to a piece of trim. On closer inspection, the wood grain was different. It was a separate piece. Using my fingernail, I pried it loose. It wasn't a button, it was a tiny wooden lever. I pushed it sideways. With a soft, satisfying thwack, the secret drawer popped open. My hands were shaking as I pulled it out. It was empty, except for a small brass key and a yellowed envelope with my name, Elena, written in my grandfather's elegant script. I tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter. "My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, the time has come. I hope you have found your strength. I never doubted you would. The key is not for this desk. It is for a safe deposit box at the Old City Fidelity Bank downtown. Box 347. Your mother knows about it. I made her sign the papers years ago, though I doubt she remembers. Your parents are not bad people, Elena. They are just weak. Their weakness is their vanity. They built a life on an image, and that image is funded by a business that was never truly theirs to begin with. When your father wanted to start his company, I gave him the loan, a substantial one. But I am a carpenter, not a fool. I secured the loan with the only thing of value he had, the business itself. Every share, every asset is collateral against the debt, a debt that was never repaid. Inside that box, you will find the original loan agreement. He was supposed to make yearly payments. He made 3, then stopped. He probably assumed I'd forget. I did not. The note has been accumulating interest for 30 years. According to the terms, upon my death, the full ownership of the debt, and therefore the collateral, passes to the holder of the note. That holder is you. You own the business, Elena, lock, stock, and barrel. It is the foundation of everything they have. It pays for the house, the cars, the stocks. It pays for Clara's entire existence. And now, it is yours. What you do with this is up to you. All I ever wanted was for the scales to be balanced. You will know what to do. Measure twice. With all my love, Grandpa Thomas. I read the letter 3 times, the paper rattling in my shaking hands. I sank to my knees. It wasn't possible. It was too perfect, too much like a movie. The whole time, while I was begging for scraps, working 2 jobs, taking out loans for my own health, I had owned the source of it all. The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow. The rage I had pushed down for my entire life came roaring up, but it wasn't hot and wild. It was cold and sharp, like a shard of ice in my chest. All the dismissals, the favoritism, the insults, it all came together into one diamond-hard point of clarity. Grandpa was right. I knew exactly what to do. The next morning, I went to the bank. Inside the safe deposit box, just as he'd said, was a folder. The notarized loan agreement from 1995, the promissory note signed by my father, and a ledger showing the 3 tiny payments he'd made, followed by 30 years of nothing. My grandfather's accountant had even calculated the accrued interest. The final number was astronomical. My father didn't just owe me the business. He owed me more than the business was even worth. Legally, he was ruined, and so was Clara. Her entire inheritance was a house of cards, and I now owned the table it was sitting on. I took the documents to a lawyer, a sharp, hungry woman my own age. I didn't tell her the family drama, just the facts. She read through the papers, her eyebrows climbing higher and higher. "This is airtight," she said, looking at me with a new respect. "This isn't just a loan agreement, it's an executioner's axe. The collateral clause is ironclad. You don't just have a claim on the business, you are the business. You can walk in there tomorrow and change the locks. Your father is effectively an insolvent tenant." She gave me a thin, predatory smile. "So, Ms. Vance, what do you want to do?" I thought of my sister's laughter. I thought of my mother asking if brain surgery was really necessary. I thought of every single time I was made to feel small. "I want to call a meeting," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I want them all in the same room, and I want to watch their world burn." I arranged the meeting at my new lawyer's office. I told them it was a minor clerical issue with the trust. They showed up annoyed, but totally unsuspecting. Clara was complaining that it would make her late for yoga. They walked in looking just like they had before, confident, entitled, a united front. My father strode in like he owned the place, an act I now knew was a total sham. I was already sitting at the conference table, my grandfather's folder in front of me. "Thank you for coming," my lawyer, Ms. Albright, began. "We have a matter of urgency to discuss regarding the Vance Family Living Trust." My father waved a hand. Yes. Get on with it. Is there a form to sign? I have a tea time at 3. "No signatures today, Mr. Vance," she said, sliding a notice of default across the table to him. "This is more of a notification." My father picked it up. He squinted at it, confused. Then, a wave of recognition, followed by pure, bone-deep horror, washed over his face. The color drained out of him. He looked from the paper to me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "What is this?" my mother snapped. "Robert, what is it?" He couldn't speak. He just stared at me. "It's a 30-year-old debt, Mother," I said, my voice cutting through the room. "A loan Grandpa gave Dad to start the business. A loan he never paid back." Clara finally looked up from her phone. "A loan? What are you talking about?" "The loan," I continued, locking eyes with my father, "was secured with collateral. The business, all of it. The promissory note and all its interest was willed to me by Grandpa Thomas." My mother snatched the papers. Her eyes darted across the page, her bright red lipstick suddenly looking garish against her pale face. "This is ridiculous," she stammered. "Robert, tell her this is a mistake." But he just sat there, deflated, the powerful patriarch crumbling into dust. Clara let out a high, nervous laugh. "You're joking, right? This is so dramatic. Elena got a dusty old desk, and now she thinks she's a business mogul?" "The desk, Clara," I said, leaning forward, "was where he kept the key." Ms. Albright cleared her throat. "To be precise," she said calmly, "the outstanding debt exceeds the current value of Vance Industries, which means my client, Ms. Elena Vance, is now the sole legal owner of the company and all its assets. Since the trust is funded by the company, all assets distributed to you," she glanced at Clara, "are frozen. The house, the stocks, the cash, it's all tied to an insolvent entity that is no longer under your family's control." The silence that followed was the sound of a world ending. Then Clara exploded. "No!" she screamed, shooting to her feet. "You're lying! You jealous, pathetic little nobody! You've always been jealous." She spun to my father. "Daddy, do something. Tell this witch she's lying." My father finally found his voice. A weak, pleading whisper. Elena, please, we can talk about this. It was a family matter. A misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I shot back. Was it a misunderstanding when you couldn't help with my medical bills because things were tight? Were things tight when you paid for Clara's wedding, or her failed boutique, or her car, or her entire life? Because it sure seems like you were funding her life with my money. My mother started crying. Not tears of regret, but tears of pure, selfish rage. How could you do this to us? After everything we've given you, we gave you a home. You gave me scraps, I said, the cold fury finally breaking free. You gave me leftovers. You gave me a front row seat to the Clara show my entire life. You didn't raise 2 daughters. You raised a princess and her servant. And now the servant is collecting her back pay. Clara was hyperventilating. The house. My house. You can't take my house. It was never your house, Miss Albright cut in smoothly. It's a company asset. A company owned by Ms. Vance. Please, Elena, my father begged, tears streaming down his face. He looked so old and pathetic. A stranger. Your sister. She won't survive. She doesn't know how to do anything. And that was it. After everything, his first thought was still her. His first plea was to protect her. He didn't see the daughter they had wronged for 30 years. He only saw the daughter they had completely ruined. I stood up. I looked at their 3 broken faces. The smug superiority, all gone. Replaced by raw, terrified desperation. I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, just a vast, quiet emptiness. The rage had burned out, leaving only the cold ashes of truth. The time for talking is over, I said. Ms. Albright will be in touch about the transfer of control. She'll let you know how long you have to vacate the properties. I walked to the door. Elena, wait, my mother shrieked. You can't just walk away. We're your family. I paused, my back to them. I thought about that word. Family. I thought about my grandfather, the man who saw me, the man who built a 30-year plan to give me the justice he knew I'd never get otherwise. He was my family. These people, they were just the architects of my pain. Without turning around, I said, you stopped being my family the day you decided one daughter was worth more than the other. And then I walked out, leaving them in the ruins. So, what happened next wasn't some big, fiery explosion. It was more like a quiet dismantling of everything they had built. Ms. Albright was an absolute shark. Within a week, control of Vance Industries was mine. The company, it turned out, was poorly managed but solid. My dad had been running it like his personal piggy bank, but the core business was sound. I spent the first month with a forensic accountant, cleaning up the mess and cutting off the credit cards that were funding Clara's lifestyle. They tried to fight it, of course. My father's lawyer took one look at my grandfather's agreement and basically told him to surrender. Grandpa Thomas had built a perfect trap. Clara had to move out of the big house. The Hamptons place was sold. The art was liquidated. My parents had to sell their home and move into a small rental. The shockwave of their downfall rippled through their social circle. All their smug friends disappeared pretty fast. I didn't take everything. I wasn't a monster. I was just. I set up a small trust for my parents, enough for rent and groceries. It was more than they ever offered me. For Clara, I offered nothing. That might sound cruel, but it was the kindest thing I could have done. For the first time in her life, she had to face reality. She had to get a job. I heard she's working as a restaurant hostess now, complaining to anyone who will listen about her cruel sister. She's finally learning, in her 30s, the lessons I had to learn when I was 5. As for me, I didn't keep the business. I had no desire to be CEO of a company that was basically a monument to my family's dysfunction. I hired a real management team to run it, and with Ms. Albright's help, put my shares into a portfolio. I was wealthy, sure, but more importantly, I was free. I finally bought that powerful telescope I'd wanted since I was 16. I set it up on the balcony of my new condo, a beautiful place I bought with cash. Some nights, I just sit out there for hours, looking up at the stars, and I think about my grandfather and his patient, long game kind of love. He didn't just give me money, he gave me vindication. He gave me back the self-worth they had spent 30 years chipping away. Being the unfavored, child can wreck you. But in a strange way, it was my salvation. It forced me to be tough, to be independent, to build a life for myself. My sister, the favored one, was so pampered she became fragile, like a hothouse flower who dies at the first touch of cold. I was the weed that grew through a crack in the pavement. They tried to bury me, but they didn't realize I was a seed. I don't speak to them anymore. That silence isn't angry, it's peaceful. I walked away, not with bitterness, but with the quiet satisfaction of justice being served. The secret I inherited wasn't just a legal document, it was the truth. The truth that love shouldn't be a competition, and that your worth isn't determined by what other people think of you. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is just quietly take back what's yours. That was my story of finding justice in a family that had totally written me off. It's a good reminder that being undervalued doesn't mean you're without value. If you are on my side through this, please give this a like and subscribe for more stories. I really want to know what you think. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have been merciful, or would you have taken everything? Let me know in the comments below.